Rogue Radio. Now available on Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. Keep it rogue.
Hey guys, today we are sponsored by Rogue Country and Rogue Radio, which are available on mixcloud.com/Rogue Country. I'm super fucking proud to be part of that initiative. It's artists, promoting artists, and showing the positive sides of country music, roots music, dark folk, murder folk, alt country, honky tonk, bluegrass, you name it. If it's not in the mainstream, Rogue Country are pushing it. And for Rogue Radio, Rogue Country listeners, and now Into the Van listeners, we have a little treat for you all as well. We've teamed up with Black Coffee Worship, a heavy black coffee company full of flavor, strength, and power. Being massive fans of the heavier side of rock and roll, they draw their influences from metalheads, punk, rock, hardcore, black metal, thrash metal, all to produce a company with the same far beyond driven attitude. For Into the Van listeners and Rogue Radio listeners, if you go to Black Coffee Worship's website, which is blackcoffeeworship.co.uk, and go to their store and use the code RC15, that's RC15, you'll get 15% off your order of coffee. They've got a load of different blends, a load of different beans, and it's a really great local company that I'm super proud to know and work with, and I really think you'll dig them. So head over to blackcoffeeworship.co.uk and use the promo code RC15. Can you hear that? Can you hear it? No, you can't. I've got a new chair. After I think this is the 20th episode, so finally 20 episodes in, I've got a brand new chair. I was still using my old chair when I talked to Harry, so you have to deal with some of the squeaking, but the squeaking is gone. I've got a brand new chair with lumbar support. It's cushioned, it's comfy, and I can't believe I ever had such a piece of shit chair to begin with. Talking of Rogue Country before, Rogue Country is how I found Harry Pedigo. I'm lucky enough that I get to work with Rogue Country, listen to artists, get to the inbox and see who sent stuff in. Harry was one of those people who sent stuff in with his EP, Dylan is Dead. With a name like that, I was interested. Looking at the artwork, it was reminiscent of, black metal imagery that I'm, a huge fan of black metal and thrash metal and power metal and all that type of stuff. So Harry's artwork immediately grabbed me, and then I listened to his music, and holy shit, you need to listen to Dylan is Dead. Harry Pedigo has brought out an EP that fuses extreme music and black metal with traditional country and acoustic music, and it's just phenomenal. I know, as my own artist and artistic voice, I love it to be heavy. That's why I say on t-shirts, it's too heavy. This is heavier. This is more extreme. It's faster. It's in your face. The vocals are more metal. And if you like my stuff, if you like black metal, and if you're a fan of traditional country music, Harry Pedigo's got you covered. Dylan is Dead is a phenomenal EP. If you think it's too heavy for you, which, it may be for some, you can head over to his Bandcamp, and as well as Dylan is Dead, he also has a collected volume of folk songs, which include, fiddle tunes, old standards, along with some originals that show his lighter side. And he's a phenomenal artist, and I'm so happy that I got to discover him through the Rogue Country inbox, and I just wanted to talk to him as soon as I could. I don't think it's when we hit record, but before we hit record, I was explaining to Harry, when I first set up Into the Van, I wanted it to be, face-to-face interactions. I wanted to actually talk to artists and meet people, and obviously COVID's put an end to that, so I had to adapt, and I didn't really want to do any interviews with people I hadn't met previously, but, that would have meant I hadn't have had Rob Henry on, would have meant I hadn't had Amelia Quinn or Ben Kaplan on. It means I wouldn't have had Bella White and definitely Harry Pedigo. So I'm glad, I laxed my own rules to make a better podcast. And we hit over 1,000 downloads, so I'm fucking stoked about that as well. Thank you all to everyone who's been listening. As we've hit 1,000 downloads, I want to do something for you guys. If you would like a free digital download of The Next Life, all you need to do is direct message me on Instagram at Mike333West, at Twitter, which is Mike333West, or Facebook, which is MikeWest333, just to make a bit of a change of pace. If you hit me up on any of those platforms, I will send you a digital download for The Next Life, and I'm going to drop in a teaser here. I've done, say a father to son, and let this world leave you cold. Do what you can and love what you do, for it's a long and lonely road. It's a long and lonely road. It's a long and lonely road. And again, I'm super proud of this record. I want to get it to as many ears as possible. And as we've had over 1,000 listens of Into the Van, I really want to share it with you guys. I've only heard from a couple of people who have listened to this podcast. So if you have listened, please drop me a comment, drop me a line, just so I know that you're out there, because, you know, this isn't live music. This is me talking into the void and hoping people get back to me. The response I've had has been incredible, but, you know, my ego needs more, and I want to make sure that you guys are enjoying it and you guys are, you know, listening to it. And if you have thoughts about it, you know, I've changed the chair now, so if you have other thoughts, let me know, because this is a podcast that I want to grow with you. So please, you know, email me at mike333west@outlook.com. There's tons of different ways to get in touch, and I really want to hear from you. But without further ado, let's get into Harry Pedigo's podcast, because he was such a pleasure to talk to. You know, he was super friendly, super outgoing, super warm. The conversation just flowed. And I'm so happy that I got to have this conversation with a man who's just bringing out some incredible music that I think changes the game and changes the perspective of what heavy country music or heavy alternative country music can be. Because we've got folks like Sean James and Amigo the Devil, Dylan Walsh, Possessed by Paul James. I'll throw myself in there, you know, as a inspired by these people, and it's awesome to see someone else flying that heavy flag for the acoustic genres. So without further ado, this is episode 20 of Into the Van with Mike West and Harry Pedigo. Welcome to Into the Van with me, Mike West. Okay, so we're rolling now, and thank you so much for joining us. I believe it was your birthday on Saturday.
That's right, Mike. It was my 28th birthday, so I can no longer join the 27 club, but maybe that's for the better. Thank you, man.
Yeah, awesome, man. I was 30 on Saturday as well, so we shared the same birthday, which I
You're
realized.
kidding me, November. Oh, my good. Well, happy birthday to you too, Mike.
Thanks
That's
so
wonderful,
much.
man.
Yeah, but it's weird that you brought up the 27 club, because that was my first thought when I hit 28. And I don't know if you, as a musician, obviously, like Hendrix, Cobain, Winehouse, Robert Johnson, like everyone's in the 27 club. And when I passed them and turned 28, and now I'm 30 and I'm still thinking about it, you realize how fucking young they were.
Oh, it's incredible, man. It's crazy. Those guys were just, you know, it's amazing the amount that they accomplished during their lifetimes, for sure. It definitely is a wake-up call to, I need to get my ass in gear or something, you know?
Yeah. Because, like, I think I discovered Hendrix when I was, like, 15, 16. I remember I discovered, like, Nirvana and Kurt Cobain younger than that. And when you're a teenager, you hear 27 and you're like, that's an adult, that's an old person. And looking back, and it's like, it makes it so much more, like, tragic. And then you realize how much they actually did accomplish in that small amount of time. And it's just a really weird perspective. It's even like Amy Winehouse and stuff, where it's 27's fuck all at a time to go.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. You think about 27, it feels just like yesterday. I was, 21, and it's young, man. It's young. It's crazy to see those people leave, and the legacy they leave as well too is wild, man.
Yeah, but I was just like I have existential crisis on the best of days. But I was even thinking, like, obviously I'm 30 now, and my dad was 25 when he had me, and he was like 22 when he had my sister. So by the time he was 30, he already had like a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I've got like 2 cats and an album out, and that's kind of like.
Exactly, man. I had the same thing happen. I went into work today. I teach at a small school here in Ohio, and the older teacher there, she said, "Happy birthday," and she said, "How old are you?" And I told her 28, and she said, "By that time, I had 2 kids." And I was like, "Holy shit, that's just, it's wild, man."
It's weird. I don't know if there's like the generations are just kind of, I don't know why it seems to be like not necessarily slowing down or being more immature. but it definitely seems like I wouldn't be in the same headspace as my dad was when he was 30. And there seems to be like a generational thing of people like not necessarily easing off the gas, but just taking different routes.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does seem like it's been. I think the same thing about my dad. He was born in '53, and it's definitely weird thinking about what he was doing at my age and what I'm doing now. And you're right. It seems like people are definitely exploring different things and pursuit of I don't know, taking their time on their artistic pursuits. And it's interesting time to be alive, man, for sure.
Yeah, I read a book a while ago, and they were talking about these like little white foxes that they've been breeding in the Antarctic, and like as the generations passed, they went from like feral to like the 10th generation was like a puppy, like it was like completely tame and stuff. And I wonder if that's kind of like,
Wow.
are we kind of getting bred into not like immaturity again, but it's like that kind of like society's kind of shaped us to be not necessarily the prototype that like our dads and granddads were.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's crazy, man. I was at school, I've been working with the kids. We've been reading Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and just thinking about how, over the years with the emergence of new technologies and new ideas, and it's kind of scary to see how that does shape the way you live. I just notice, I'm not sure, if you see this where you guys live, but here in Ohio, when you go to pump gasoline in your car, they have like little TV screens that'll turn on they're on the pump, and they'll turn on when you're pumping your gasoline.
Really?
And it's just like, yeah, man, it's frightening because you're just bombarded with sort of superficial entertainment, pop and all this stuff that just, it's meant to sort of keep you from doing what you're supposed to do. It's very weird for sure, man.
Yeah, I always I worked in a supermarket for 6 years when I was like 16. It was my first job. And like, again, just because I have like this weird existential crisis brain where I have a freak out every fucking 5 seconds, I was working in this shop and it had like every choice imaginable of food, but it was all the same food. So it was like you had like 20 options of the same thing. And then I was like, this is just an illusion of choice to make you think you have like a control or a decision on stuff. And the way the odds and like the cards are stacked now, it's just you don't really have a choice in what's gonna happen or what kind of food you want, like outside of growing it yourself and going completely off the grid. It's really weird.
Yeah, oh, it's bizarre, Mike. And not to make a silly comparison, but what you guys do with your various podcasts in Rogue Country is a perfect example where there's not a whole lot of element of choice in what we choose to consume musically, and it's like, man, it's the same damn thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think coming to like music and stuff, it is, if you take those 20 options at the supermarket and you take what's on the radio, you do have this kind of jaded vision of what the world is and what music and what art is. Because if you only pay attention to the top 50, even if you pay attention to like the top country artists on like the Billboard or whatever's been nominated or whatever is seen by the establishment as what country music is or what even like any genre is, you go, there's so much more to that. And like, I try and convert people on Twitter and stuff when they say they don't like country music, and I go, no, you don't like the country music you've been shown. There's always a difference there. And I think especially the stuff with Rogue Country is, it's just, you try and make conscious decisions. But I think like you're a fan of black metal and stuff. Once I think you get into like metal, which is automatically outside the mainstream, to start looking for stuff. So to bring it back to yourself, this is a podcast where I'm having a conversation with you and not just being like, is the world against us? What is like your origins? What's your background before like coming to music and then coming into music?
Oh yeah, man. It's been interesting. I've played music since I was a little kid. I started playing violin when I was 8 years old, and I got a little bit, kind of disenchanted with classical music, not because I didn't like it, but I was, just kind of terrible at practicing and keeping up with what I needed to do. And so I got into old time, Appalachian, Kentucky bluegrass and old time fiddle and Irish and, Irish fiddle and all that kind of stuff. And just really, it really resonated with me, that the tradition of, passing songs on by ear and learning them that way. And that was something that really formed, the way I looked at music, that kind of word of mouth, sharing things through an organic way. Like you were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, like introductions made in an authentic way. And that kind of, I think that perhaps maybe informed just how I, started to approach finding new music. Was I wanted to find people who would sell me on, and people whose opinions I trusted, and not, something that, from somebody I didn't know about or care about,
And like with the classical thing, I always think, and it's the same thing, I've been to like university and done like a music degree and stuff. And the second someone says, you have to learn this, I'm like, fuck off in every way, shape, or form. Like the second someone turns it into like a task instead of fun, which is what music is. It's like the second someone takes the fun out of it, I instantly drop it. And I'm so stubborn. Like I'd burn my guitars to like stop anyone from trying to teach me something I didn't want to do. But like with the classical stuff, how did you come into the old time, like the Appalachian stuff? Was that through like family members and things?
Yeah, but my dad, he plays banjo and guitar, and he's an accomplished bluegrass musician, and he would oftentimes, play the Grand Ole Opry around the house as kids, or we would listen to Lester and Earl. We listened to, the Carter Family. Listened to a little bit. My favorite probably would be, Ralph Stanley. Loved listening to Ralph Stanley as a kid, and he introduced me to a fiddle player out of Moorhead, Kentucky, which is south of where I live in Brown County, Ohio. And his name is Leo Blair. And he kind of adopted me as a student after I transitioned away from classical. I think the area that I live in, it's very much, it's kind of the foothills of Appalachia, and that music's big around this area. And I just was lucky to find Leo, who's just, he was a phenomenal fiddle teacher, and Dad kind of coaxed me on. And Leo really, like you were talking about, he made it fun. And he kind of, he was one of those teachers, it's weird with education, like you were saying, with learning new things. I kind of like to understand why I'm learning something, or the meaning behind it. And Leo was very good at explaining the history of things. And when it came to techniques with old time fiddle, he would explain why you would learn that technique and how it applied to a song. And he really kind of, Dr. Leo Blair was really an instrumental person in my music for sure.
Cool, man. And what was like the mindset going from classical to more like traditional, like folk style fiddle? Is there obviously in terms of like the notation and like the feel, it's different, like it's different, but what's like, do you think are like the core differences between those two types of like playing?
Man, one of the things that I learned, the first thing that comes to mind, Mike, is, and I like I said, I love listening and playing classical music, but, it's very formulaic. That's too harsh of a word, but, there's you stick to the music to a certain degree. And one of the things I just loved about old time music was, they encourage improvisation. They encourage your own renditions of songs. And, I listened to a collection of fiddle recordings growing up, and it was neat. This guy who did this collection had identified various areas in Kentucky that played, the same song, but a different rendition of the song. So, you would go, I guess before the era of, radio and, vinyl and whatever, you would hear a song, and, that would travel 20 miles away, and they would teach it. And that tradition of, uniqueness and authenticity and based on improvisation, that's really, one of the core differences. And one of the things that really appealed to me was that improvisation and you making it your own in a way.
Yeah. That's really interesting, man. I think that's one of the things about classical and kind of pop music, that they have these structures where, it needs to be this structure for it to be this type of piece. And that's really interesting. Obviously, if you're writing in that style, because I've written for like string quartets and shit, when you're writing for that style, it makes sense to write in that style. But then when you're a musician and you kind of realize that you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like Black Sabbath was a big one for me to do that, because they didn't really stick to the verse, chorus, middle. They do like verse, and then whatever the fuck was the end of the song. and I try and put that into my songs. It's a really interesting way to try and fuck with structure.
Yeah, man, it's badass. I love that. You're totally right with, bringing up Sabbath. There's in like old time fiddle music. I really like these like modal songs where it's kind of right in that in between major minor, kind of somewhere in the middle, and that kind of reminds me of that Sabbath kind of vibe where you're like, man, I don't know what the hell is going on here chord wise, but I feel spooked the fuck out, dude.
Yeah, I'm with like going from traditional stuff. Before that, what was like as a classical student, what like composers or what like pieces stood out to you back then? Because I really loved Schubert stuff, like his piano.
Oh yeah, man.
Pieces like Elkenig and stuff. Like I really love those. Like I think that's like the first metal song, in my opinion. That like
Yeah, dude.
Like I really love that type of stuff and like Beethoven's things. But what was like pieces? Do you still listen to classical today?
Oh, I listened to a bit of classical. I remember as a kid when I was studying classical, I was a young guy. I was probably from 8 to 12 or something. And our teacher was just he was obsessed with Bach. We went through all of Bach's minuets, and I remember just it was kind of tough to get your head in the right space as a kid to listen to that. But then, like you said, going back and listening to it now, you're like, holy shit, that was Bach was Eddie Van Halen back in the day, man. Holy shit.
I think that's one of the things, and I think when I was studying it, one of the things that like the classical teachers always fail to do is put it into a perspective that engaged with you. Where it was like, if like the thing that I always loved about Beethoven stuff was his what the fuck's it called? Where it's a tribute to a great man, what he wrote for Napoleon. He changed the title because of how Napoleon betrayed France. It was like, it was meant to be in his honor, but then it was in his memory because he was dead to him, according to Beethoven. And that type of thing is where you need to know that type of stuff before you even listen to these pieces of music. There's such like a rich history to this that I think is missed out. And a lot of people hear this kind of arty, like high class music, but they don't realize how rooted in history it is.
Dude, you're so spot on. That's such a neat point. Thinking about the context really shapes the way that you appreciate or listen to or view something. That's kind of the truth even in modern music. You think about the pop country stuff that we hear on the radio here in the States. It's like, man, you have a lot of people who try to replicate a form without having the same context. You know what I mean? It's like they don't. In order for Beethoven to write, the first, diss track at Napoleon, you have to have that context to be in that environment, that political situation. And the same thing's true with, the music going on today. People try to, in my mind, at least, replicate without context.
Yeah, definitely, man. I've just remembered it was the Eroica by Beethoven, the one he was thinking. But so what were your first bands and stuff? Was it traditional like bluegrass bands and stuff? Where were the first ones you started performing? And where are you playing fiddle mainly for the most part? Because I know you play guitar as well.
Yeah, I started fiddle mainly, and it was, a couple bluegrass bands locally. I played a lot with my father once I kind of started getting better at old time music. But I played played fiddle kind of, in these bluegrass bands, you might have 5 or 6 members, and kind of always had that, backseat kind of backup player kind of thing. I like that, and that's cool. And it really kind of cut my teeth on some of the classic bluegrass stuff, but later started getting into playing in some duos and trios, kind of honing down the number of people in the band to kind of get to where you could actually bounce ideas off each other.
And was that like when you started like becoming a songwriter and starting to write your own stuff as well?
I don't think, Mike, I started writing my own stuff until I started playing guitar.
Really?
And I don't think I did a whole lot of stuff with maybe tried to write a couple fiddle songs and then forgot them as soon as I deleted the recording from my phone or whatever. But when I started playing guitar, that's when it kind of opened up a new sort of a new door to possibilities of creating. And that was, man, the guitar was really a magical experience, because I was self-taught, And I never had any instruction and learned it all, either watching videos or watching people play. And I think because I approached it that way, it seemed like from the get-go, it was all about like you were talking about doing whatever the fuck you want, and it's all about creativity, and that's when I started writing some songs, I think.
Cool, man. And was that when like the metal influences started coming on? So you grew up on like classical for education stuff, then it was the old timey stuff. When did you really start becoming aware of like rock and metal? Because I think, like I was saying before, when you pick up rock and metal as like a young person, that's when like your personality really starts to be like identifying as this is me.
Yeah, dude. I tell you what, I picked up on the rock and metal, the rock and metal scene like in college. And I remember, you might remember this too, but do you remember you used to be able to get on the internet and they had I forget what it was called. It was LimeWire or something, and you could find the most obscure stuff on there. And I remember the first band that I really really liked and was really inspired by it from a rock and roll perspective. And this is kind of in your neck of the woods, but Fields of the Nephilim. I just thought my sister and I were big time into. That was our first real, bite into the apple was goth rock. We loved that. We loved Fields of the Nephilim and Rubicon, all that stuff. That was the slide guitars and Fields of the Nephilim. I love that stuff a lot, man. And then from there, just go down the rabbit hole and, you find yourself listening to Norwegian black metal and, exploring that community for sure.
Yeah, man. I remember, and obviously let's preface this by saying we know piracy is wrong.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes.
But when you're 13, you really don't give a shit because you don't understand what legal things are and what ownership is. Because I remember when I was a kid, like what I used to do in high school when I was like 13, 14 was I'd go onto Wikipedia and I'd get the metal page up, and then it'd have the off branches of each like genre of metal. Yes. And I'd go onto each genre of metal and then pick like the first 5 bands that are named on that Wikipedia page. And then go onto LimeWire. And sometimes like you'd only get half a song because whoever was seeding it would stop it. So you'd have like the last minute, you just didn't know how it ended. And I remember
man.
That was like a really interesting and fun time, because when you start discovering a music that's not like, because my dad's into punk and like Kiss and Van Halen and stuff, but he wasn't into like the heavier stuff. He wasn't into like black metal and death metal. So when you start finding that type of stuff that's like even extreme for your parents, that's when you're like, oh shit, this is mine. And even with some black metal, like my partner Siobhan, she's a fucking encyclopedia of black and death metal. She's incredible for it all. I'm like Abbott, Satyricon, and then like kind of moving away from all like Mayhem, Behemoth, and all that kind of stuff. But with yours, because Dylan is dead, like before we get into this, I just want to say this is exactly why I'm like I love working with Rogue Country, because you emailed or messaged the Rogue Country inbox, which I monitor, and the first track I was hooked from Dylan is Dead, man. It's so fucking cool. But what was the kind of thought process or the songwriting ideas between trying to fuse that kind of extreme noise and vocal deliveries of black metal with the more traditional sound like country music?
Man, I tell you what, it goes back to what we were talking about a second ago with, learning guitar. Like we were talking about, Black Sabbath. And I remember, like you were saying, you going on Wikipedia and you're like 13 and you're like, holy shit, that guy got his fingers cut off in an accident. He started playing drop tune. You're like, and I started playing because of those guys, I started playing. I basically learned drop D and dadgad before I learned, traditional chord shapes. And so transitioning from that and learning, traditional chord shapes and getting into Bob Dylan and Neil Young, Roy Harper and those kind of guys. And, I think from the get-go, I had that drop D thing where just, man, you put a guitar and drop D and holy shit, I just love, suddenly it's like, that's what I want to play is drop D. And then from there, I don't know. I just, I got a little bit frustrated, with some of the people, in the local scene playing acoustic music, and everybody kind of plays, I don't know, like 145 or whatever, really traditional. I was like, man, it would be cool to play something fast and heavy on an acoustic guitar.
Yeah, that's the thing I like about your stuff, because some people, and I don't know if it was like the MTV Unplugged generation that kind of fucked it for everyone, but people thought you could just take a rock song off an electric guitar and play it on an acoustic guitar and be like, it's now an acoustic song. And that kind of fucked what acoustic guitars could do in terms of being heavy without having to be detuned or just trying to play like a metal riff on a guitar, like an acoustic guitar, which sounds shit.
Right, man. No, you're totally right. It's weird. It seems like that is like a recipe for, in often cases, a recipe for disaster, where you think that, like, I'm just going to take a rock song and I'm going to play it on an acoustic. Maybe if you're Kurt Cobain, but, one of the things that I thought was kind of a neat idea was, a lot of this, the same thing with English ballads and, this rich history of murder ballads are both of our countries have, is, the traditional music is oftentimes you can find some dark music. And if you kind of reverse the formula and say, well, I'm going to take an acoustic song and kind of metal it up, rather metal song and acoustic, turn it into acoustic. That seemed like it. That's one of the things I like to do. Find a song like Pretty Polly or something like that and just play it really fucking, hardcore.
Like with, obviously you've been in duos and stuff, and like, had you been gigging around as like duos and stuff for a while? And then when did you start playing like the songs from Dylan Is Dead? When did you start playing them live?
I kind of did, like you said, I ran that circuit, with a lot of bar gigs, for the past, probably a solid 4 or 5 years. My summers, I teach school, and we have the summers off in the U.S. And so I would play every weekend, bar gigs, and then you enjoy the money, but then you start getting a little bit a little dissatisfied or jaded. And so I kind of honed down further, wanted to get really just the parts that meant something. Started doing a couple solo gigs with a little bit of darker music and some of my own, songs mixed in. That didn't happen until maybe 2 years ago. And, Dylan Is Dead came out this past summer. And so I'd say for about a year and a half, I've been kind of messing around with that model of playing out live.
Cool, man. And what was the reaction like? Because obviously, like, I do the same thing. Like, one of my taglines I have it on the back of a t-shirt is not country enough, not folk enough, not blues enough, too heavy, which people have like told me before I put on a t-shirt. People were saying it was a criticism, but I was like, that's why I fucking play, so I don't give a shit. But like, when you're on a lineup or you're on a gig and people, like, you bring out the acoustic and people are expecting, a certain sound, what's the reaction been like when you started dropping, like, When Shadows, or what's it called, Where Shadows Forever Fall?
Yeah, man, that's I don't know. It's kind of, it's been a little bit crazy, especially locally. The guy who engineered the album, my good friend Steven Strunk, who has a recording studio down here, he told me I should, maybe think about releasing it under a different name or pseudonym, just because it might be too weird for people who are used to hearing Carter family covers and Earl Scruggs stuff. But it seems like it's sort of grown on people. It definitely seemed at first, Mike, it seemed like it was, completely no response at all locally. And then, people outside, Appalachian Noise Records and my friends from, Pennsylvania, new friends from Oklahoma, or outside of my group of, local, local scene or whatever. They seemed like they kind of caught on first, and then slowly it's been, catching on. They're getting used to hearing a different kind of song, like we're for Shadows Forever Fall, for instance.
Cool, man. And like, with kind of the acceptance, it's really weird because it seems to always be like the outside of wherever you kind of focus on playing. It's always the periphery that like get onto it first. But with kind of like the peripheral things, was there a clash of, you said about a pseudonym, was there that hesitation to bring this out or perform them live initially?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was such a different, thing for me to do. But, it seemed like there was a grain of enough folk and country to kind of spin it. Like, where Shadows Forever Fall, you could see, if that wasn't, without the growly vocals or whatever, it could be just a, folk song, it's almost it tries to ride that line where I think that that's what made it so it was, somewhat more easy to accept for people who are used to something else.
Yeah, that was the thing, man. Like, I think it's sincere, and that's what like loads of stuff comes down to. And it wasn't like someone trying to do like Emperor songs on a fucking acoustic guitar. It
Yeah,
was
dude.
someone trying to fuse these genres that they love into something that like represented them. But like, you obviously have on Bandcamp, you obviously have Dylan Is Dead, and you have the Collected Fiddle songs. Which do you think represents your perspective and your voice best?
I'd say it gotta be Dylan Is Dead, man, for the reasons you just said, because it's that union of like, it's that I don't know, it's like that, the image that we portray, growing up, and kind of the image that we want to portray. It's a union of the two things, like our our cultish sort of interest that we want to keep hidden, and then finally you get to that moment where you can, oh, here's the way, here's the formula to share it, and it feels good. It feels really good. Like you said, I think that those were, all authentically written songs. I felt good about all of them. I really was happy that finally got out, and I was really lucky, man. That I was really flattered that Appalachian Noise, which is like a balls to the wall, fucking heavy black metal, extreme metal, label. They did me a solid and did a run of those on limited cassette, and that was really, that felt like sort of a, I don't know, a welcome into the acceptance into the scene. Like, you're okay, you're
Yeah.
in. It felt
Yes.
good.
Sigma, do you know the Devil's Trade?
No, dude, the Devil's Trade.
Yeah, he's a Hungarian musician and he's a folk artist, and he plays like really heavy. Like, he still uses an electric guitar and a banjo and stuff. He's a solo musician. Well, he's on, I think he's just been signed to, what the fuck's that record label called? Seasons of the Mist.
Oh yeah, Seasons of the Mist, man, that's bad.
He's just brought out his folk album on Seasons of the Mist, and he's been signed to like Doomstar bookings to like go to Europe. And he's a folk artist who plays this like heavy folk music. If you don't know, definitely go onto him, man. Like,
I'll check it out.
Use a tour perfectly together. But like, it's that kind of, going back to what we talked about like pop country and mass produced music. I think what your music does and what like the Devil's Trade does is it challenges people in their perceptions. And when you start challenging people always kind of go, I didn't realize I needed this. And that's what I really think this type of heavy folk music is doing, is it's fusing these genres that bring people together over just like a respective, sincere music. And it's really interesting to kind of see how this trend's kind of exploding with people like Amigo the Devil.
I was just about to mention Amigo the Devil and all these guys, like, even, a bigger name, I guess, Nurgle's been doing this, funky side project, Me and That Man. And I don't know, it seems like there's some kind of, there does seem to be a bit of a trend in this like heavy, dark folk where it seems like it's catching on. And it probably is for the exact reasons, you mentioned, it's like this dissatisfaction. People are tired of I think, of hearing sort of the Billboard top 20 country songs. And even I think that they get a little bit frustrated with, the song structure, kind of going back to our conversation on classical music. I remember I had a teacher who was talking about, what engages a listener with music. And one of the things that's very interesting about classical music is, our minds try to predict where the melody is going. And classical music, challenges you in a way, because it's obviously very different than the sorts of melodies you would hear in pop or country or rock or whatever. And I think that these models of songwriting, they might get a little bit tired after a while. And I think that's happening with the folk and country thing. Because man, people have been playing the Bob Dylan, model for a hell of a long time, dude. There's nothing wrong with it, but damn, it's been a while.
Well, what was the reasoning behind the title Dylan Is Dead?
Oh man, I tell you what, I love Bob Dylan a lot. I really think the world of Bob, and I just really enjoy. I grew up on Bob. My uncle would play Bob Dylan and Neil Young all the time, and I just love their music, and I love their passion and authenticity. And in my mind, Dylan almost kind of took on sort of like a mythological sort of place in music history in the same way Elvis, the king of rock and roll, same way Jimmy Page was like the wizard of guitar. And Bob Dylan to me was like that idea that you could be the singer songwriter solo artist and have people listen and understand and share ideas, just one man, one band with a guitar. And it's odd because it seems like that sort of has become almost impossible to attain with sort of the oversaturation of people doing that. I'm not sure if it was the mass production of guitars that killed us, Mike, but now everybody has an acoustic guitar, and that's good. But I think that it's sort of it's killed the idea that, or the concept that Dylan represented, that this vagabond songwriter, this sort of strolling minstrel, this bard, this one-man band who has, a story to tell. That's kind of, I don't know. It seems like that's sort of maybe something that's kind of, it's gone by us now. It maybe past.
That's really interesting, man. I think, yeah, you're right. The acoustic guitar market is definitely oversaturated, and I wonder how many people kind of buy one with the intention of learning one properly. They get like 2 Oasis songs in and go, that's enough for a house party, and then leave it. Because there is and I saw it with when Ed Sheeran came about, when I was doing like open mic scenes and starting to come out when he was like at the peak. There was so many people then who were bringing loop pedals and shit to open mics and stuff.
Yes.
And it's a really weird thing because, again, it's part of like the mainstream. Like an acoustic guitar is easy to pick up, easy to play, but it's hard to play with conviction, I think. And that's what Dylan, I think, encapsulates. Like, I'm not a huge Dylan fan. Like, I kind of have the opinion, maybe the wrong one, or maybe the controversial opinion that like I like his songs and he's a phenomenal songwriter, but I like other people doing his songs more.
Yeah, man, the voice didn't help the poor guy. I mean, you're exactly right. I see. Yeah, for sure. It's like, that, like you mentioned with Ed Sheeran, the same thing. I feel like it's happening today to an extent in the States with, one of these up and coming and, really accomplished musicians, Tyler Childers, who's blowing up, which I love Tyler Childers, but man, if you go to a jam anywhere in the state of Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, wherever, it's everybody's trying to sound identical to that sound. It's weird. It's very frightening.
These artists kind of come along, and because of how influential and game changing they are, they change the game so much that it kind of fucks the genre for a while. And it's really weird, man. And like my friend Josh Betters, who's a Welsh country musician, he said this thing, and I shared it on Facebook, and he got a ton of shit for it because he said Bob Dylan is mumble rap for hippies.
That's so accurate though.
And like that's the thing, it is dead accurate and it's fucking hilarious. But like these type of artists, I think definitely Childers to an extent for like modern, it'll be interesting to see like his longer legacy. But like these people like come out of the quagmire of or stagnation of these acoustic artists, and then everyone goes, he did it, I'll be like that, missing the point of he did it because he was using his own voice. And it's the same thing with Dylan.
That's brilliantly said, Mike. That's exactly it. They see that he did something magical with music. He accomplished something that's purely unique in a way. That's original. That's authentic. That's true. And then they mistake, like you said, they think that just replicating will do it when it's in fact that's not the end isn't the goal. It's the path there, which that's brilliantly said, man.
Well, it's crazy, man, especially with like Childers. Like I've seen him twice now, and like I wasn't a fan of his not Long Violent History, the album before that, Country Squire. I wasn't really a fan of that, and I saw him as a solo artist in like a small club in Manchester first, and then I saw him at a sold out show with a full band, and it was weird how the vibe had completely changed, and it had gone from like it was a sold out show in the Manchester one, but it was like 60 people. Then it was a sold out show for the other one, but it was like 300 people. And it was weird to see the crowd shift. Has that kind of been a thing, obviously, as an American, as a country artist yourself? Has that shift in crowd been noticeable in like where you are or when you gig?
Yeah, I think so, man. It's been very. You mentioned a great point with Tyler. I don't know. It's really odd when you see these guys in their in the blooming and the blossoming, and they have that. When they're playing those shows, to sold out. It's sold out, but it's only a few people, and it feels so pure and it feels so like authentic. And then you kind of get this. America really struggles, man, with this sort of bar musician problem where you just get a lot of people who want to go to the show and drink and don't really it's not about the music. And I see that a lot with it's very hard to find an audience that is receptive, man, for sure.
And with like your type of stuff, I assume when you start playing and you perform the vocals the way you do and you play the guitar the way you do, how much does that mean people kind of like stop what they're doing? Have you noticed that kind of shift between when you perform as a duo and stuff and when you started doing this stuff?
Yeah, I think that there's, for people who aren't into heavy metal or rock and roll, man, it's the vocals do that gets them. I always loved listening to black metal vocals and just those guttural, just it really grabs your abrasive almost in a way, but at the same time melodic, and that's what makes it beautiful. And it does turn some heads and maybe kind of turn some people maybe turn some people away as well. But I would almost rather have that than I'd almost rather have that happen than people just backs to the stage drinking beer. I'd rather scare the shit out of them.
Yeah, definitely, man. And it's so let's go into like Dylan Is Dead and stuff. How long had you been sitting on them songs and how long had you been writing them songs before you started like going into the studio to record them?
Yeah. Let's see. Let me think. I know that Where Shadows Forever Fall, I wrote that one years ago. I never wrote lyrics to it, and I always really, really liked that riff. And I think I wrote To Walk a Path Carved by Wolves. I wrote that intro 5-6 years ago, maybe even when I was in high school learning kind of how to play guitar. And then I don't know, I was here in where I live in the States, I live in a very like isolated community, very small community, and I started renting a cabin to stay in while I taught school. And the cabin, Mike, it was really out. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. You're living by myself and didn't have Wi-Fi and didn't have heat. And so last winter, about this time was when I said, I'm going to get out the acoustic guitar. And then once you start, I remember playing, I think that first riff, the intro, once you kind of get that in your, put that in the recipe, a lot of those other riffs just kind of started popping up. I wrote that, just over the winter, and then got into the studio in the spring, and it was cut and dry. But yeah, some of those songs were old, especially Where Shadows Forever Fall and that intro riff.
So for Shadows, so you kind of wrote like the instrumental first and then the lyrics later. What was your influence with the lyrics? Because I know obviously you kind of lend from country and folk, but the lyrics are very, thematic and operatic in a way that's like typical of like death metal and like black metal, and even like Dio and stuff. I got a vibe from it where it's very fantastical. Man. What was kind of your songwriting approach to those lyrics? Because I really love like what country is you kind of singing what you're seeing, and sometimes you kind of veil it in metaphor, but not for the most part. But this is bigger in itself, like thematically. What was your process behind the lyrics?
Well, the lyrics always, it always is a struggle for me. I really like writing, riffs and chord progressions. And Mike, I just can't do it very well. And like you said, like some of the observational country folk stuff and metaphoric stuff, I like that. I just can't. It doesn't come naturally. And so the way I wrote a lot of those songs, what I would, like you said, kind of thematically, I would like to listen to them and play them over and over. And I would say, what does that sound like the soundtrack to? What would that be if that was in a film, what would that be? And, To Walk a Path Carved by Wolves is like, that's a fucking, attack of a rabid pack of, wolves on some unsuspecting villager. And Where Shadows Forever Fall, that was kind of, like we talked about it a little bit earlier with Fields of the Nephilim. I always, got into their mythos and, the fallen angels and, apocalyptic sort of stuff. I felt like a, kind of acoustic Marilyn Manson-y sort of, kind of kicking back like Nero while the angels fell from the sky, man.
Cool, man. And like, who are really like your influences? I'm gonna hit you with like fiddle or like violin influences, guitar and songwriting, like lyrics influences. Who do you consider like your top three of each?
Oh man. So let's see. Lyrically, I love, like the black metal stuff and doom metal. I think that High on Fire, I love listening to High on Fire, man. And just the crazy sort of occulty, Lovecraftian, cosmic horror. Love listening to Eric Danielson from Watain. I think that is some pure dark black metal. I love that. So poetic too. And in an odd way too, you think about Cradle of Filth. Probably Danny Filth has probably one of the most excellent grasps of the English language and poetry. I just love that it's so pure. It's so brilliant. I love that stuff, man. And violin, grew up on Kenny Baker and, John Hartford. Love songs about the river, playing those on the fiddle, and, Bobby Hicks, all those classic bluegrass guys, especially John Hartford was, liked his style. He was kind of in between that polished and, a little rough around the edges. That was brilliant. I'm trying to think guitar wise, gosh, I guess Neil Young, when Neil Young plugs into an amp on that, busted ass, Les Paul of his, but that's just that's a badass sound. Neil and, Matt Pike, of course. And, gosh, maybe even, maybe even a little bit of Dylan, honestly. I like his.
Cool, man. And like what you were saying about black metal and stuff, it is weird how poetic their stuff can be. Obviously, like black metal has this controversy and image around it that's obviously like cemented by Euronymous and Mayhem and stuff. But what that kind of takes away from, and obviously like the racism and the homophobia and all the bigotry of black metal, it goes over and casts this huge shadow over what poetry is in like other black metal bands who weren't representing them views. And it's hard to differentiate that, and it's especially hard for like mainstream audiences to even try and fathom that there's poetry and that type of stuff. And it's a really sad state of affairs. And obviously with, even Cradle of Filth with their shock value. I remember Cradle of Filth, they were the second band I ever saw live. I saw Trivium in 2005, and then I saw Cradle of Filth a few months after.
Oh, man.
That was a crazy show. But the poetry behind those type of artists, like the songwriting in metal is really underrated, I think, in terms of what it actually is. Like the poetry and the imagery used in it, it's just on another level that's not really represented in any other genre. And that's what I really liked about your stuff, was it was bringing that level to this acoustic stuff.
Well, Mike, thank you so much, man. It means a lot, just to talk about this. And, I appreciate that tremendously. And you're right about, Danny Filth. I mean, say what you want about Cradle of Filth, but I remember listening to Absinthe with Faust as a kid, and like, man, that's like that could be out of a Shakespearean, play or something. It's crazy. It really is. The beauty behind all the guttural growls is pretty. It's a pretty beautiful contrast.
And like going just onto the controversy for a bit, have you seen the film Lords of Chaos, like the Mayhem?
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
What did you think of it?
I don't know, man. I mean, I was very excited when I heard it was coming out, but keeping up with some of these guys on in the black metal community, I know that was of course, I'm not sure if you could do anything that would please the true culty black metal fans, and I get that. I thematically, maybe not quite on point, but fun movie to watch though. Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. I always eat up any sort of black metal nonsense they put out.
Yeah, man, same. It was fun to kind of like see. Obviously, it's like the Hollywoodized version of it all, and it's all streamlined, and it's like Macaulay Culkin's brother in it and stuff. But like the thing I always took away from it, and I always kind of laugh with my mates who are into it as well, is it's like, this is what happens if you don't admit you like the Scorpions.
Exactly, dude. Yeah, no kidding.
And it's all people trying to like out posture the other, and it leads into this like catastrophic tale of events where it's just people aren't comfortable admitting what they actually like.
I know, dude. They kind of get to this level where it's like these guys sort of start to believe the myth of themselves that they created, and then are offended by the truth. It's really it's a very strange. It's definitely a fun community. I crack up when you see the tweets from, like, you'll see a thing on YouTube when your YouTube algorithm is as screwed up as mine. It'll be like, Hellhammer speaks out about the Lords of Chaos. It's funny. I love the drama. That's kind of the part that makes it fun almost.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like all these kids were in like the forests of Norway wearing makeup and writing poetry, and you didn't expect drama to happen.
Yeah, you see fucking Immortal in their first music video. You don't expect that people are going to be talking about that shit later on. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. It's a riot, man.
Yeah, but like, what type of like music are you listening to now? Is there anything like kind of contemporary that you're like jamming on that's influencing you, or what you're listening to at the moment?
Gosh, man, I've been listening to a whole bunch of a band called Glass Coffin out of Kentucky. He's a black metal artist from the band punk band Black Knife, and I really been digging that. And also, there's an artist out of the South here called Vide. Who I'm hoping will get signed to Seasons of the Mist here. He's had some really successful records come out through some of the local underground labels, and some of this local black metal stuff is just refreshing to kind of, I've been interested a little bit in, trying to keep up, better with some of the, the United States black metal stuff, because I just feel, after I got, lucked out with getting onto Appalachian Noise Records, I just kind of, it opened up a new door for, I didn't really listen a whole lot to United States black metal. I mean, before that, it was all, it's Norwegian. It's, you listen to Dissection, and you listen to Mayhem, and you have, this kind of, which I love all those bands, but that's been neat. I've been really enjoying some of the United States black metal here recently.
Cool, man. That's really interesting. I think the same way that people don't expect the UK to have country music, you don't expect other countries that are, famous for one type of thing. You don't expect it to be found anywhere else. But with Appalachian Noise, how did that meeting come about, and how did you get onto working with them?
Dude, it was crazy. They said that they were going to do a compilation called True Appalachian Black Metal, which which I'm not sure how much of that was a joke or what, but they did not go through with that. But I did submit, in true black metal fashion, a hand numbered demo, and cryptic message, and that kind of stuff. And the guy, he was really nice to me, and said, we'll give it a shot. We'll give you a shot, because it was definitely not anything like they had put out before, but just serendipity, man. It was just, I submitted for that compilation, and they said, can't do the compilation, but we'd like to do you, for a limited run on here. So that was pretty cool.
So, man, all I'm thinking about is I'd love a fucking t-shirt that said True Appalachian Black Metal on it. Like that.
I know, dude, that'd be fucking riot.
So, like, with obviously Dylan is dead and things, what's kind of been going forward from that? Like, how have you been? Obviously, COVID's fucked gigs and stuff. How have you been going forward with that record to try and get it out to people and get it, into the right hands, if you will?
I've been trying to, it's tough to play that game, on social media and getting stuff out there. I mean, you got to really fucking sell people on that, and it's hit or miss. I've had it out on a couple compilations through Road Rat Records here in the U.S. And it's weird, keeping up with the stats on where people are listening to your music. It's like you said earlier, like people imagine that that the UK doesn't have a folk or country scene. Listening to Rogue Country, it's like, man, I think that you guys have a better grasp on country music than 99% of Americans. And honestly, it seems like the UK's people have been listening to it a bit. And, some people from Russia have been into it. I sent a couple demos out to them, some kind of special stuff for people who really were digging it. I got a buddy of mine, Mikkel, who lives in Sweden, and he's been into it. So I don't know. I haven't figured out how to quite get it in the right hands. I guess I'll just keep on sending it out there, man. But I've been happy with the people who have gotten into it. I've been really that's enough for me, man, for real.
So, man, and what's kind of like your future plans? Obviously, you've got the record out. Are you writing a new one, or what's kind of like your vision for the future?
Yes, I've got it, man. Mike, you would appreciate this and sympathize as a musician, but I've got it completely. I've got it completely written. I've got an EP that is, I think it's going to be about 3 to 4 songs, and it's by far the work I'm most proud of. And it's a much it's more aggressive, it's grander, it's longer, it's heavier, and I just can't the engineer who I work with, he was exposed to COVID, and so we've been backed up. We tracked all the rhythm tracks, and now we're just kind of in purgatory waiting on everybody to heal up and get safe. So, hopefully in the springtime, the follow-up's going to be, I hope it's going to be legendary. It's going to be badass, man.
Awesome, man. And what's kind of been the songwriting process? Has it been similar to Dylan Is Dead, where you've had the instrumental tracks first and then the lyrics come later?
Yes, it has been partly. The 2 tracks that are kind of the core of this next release. They're both much longer than any of the stuff on Dylan Is Dead. The first track is, I think it was 8 minutes when we tracked the rhythm to it, and it's the lyrics came like that for that one, and it was it just felt, when you have all the stars align, you're like, holy shit, that's a song I'm proud of. So. It's been similar, but it seemed like, a little bit more motivation, instead of being motivated by, being depressed in a cabin, with no heat. Now it's just like, man, that'd be so fucking cool to get to one up this last release and really try to catch some people's attention. And also, people who dig it, I really want to give back to them and make sure that they have some new fun music to get into.
That's awesome, man. Like, I think what you do is really interesting and unique in like what you're like fusing, and it's showing this again. We were talking about it before, like this trend of heavier acoustic music that is true acoustic music. It's not meant to be anything else other than what it is. But have you seen that kind of trend picking up? Is there anyone kind of around your way that's doing something similar, or was it kind of, because for me, like I was playing this kind of like heavier stuff where I wasn't like singing as a metal singer or anything. It was just kind of what I was doing. And it wasn't until I heard like Sean James's stuff where I was like, oh shit, that's someone else. Has there been anyone that's kind of clicked like that for you, and that's kind of motivated you, or at least let you know that you aren't alone in this?
It has been it's been cool because nobody in the local scene, and keep in mind, man, I mean, it's a very tiny, I live kind of in the middle of nowhere, but outside, hooking up with people like you, and more recently, talking with some of these dark folk bands and dark country bands, like somebody like you think of who, somebody like the Trash Bats out of Pennsylvania. Those guys, they get it, and I can bond with them and identify with them over that kind of dark, heavy, no fucks given acoustic music. And you're right, you find these people, when you find it, man, it feels good, because you get that too, and you find somebody who is on the same wavelength, it clicks.
Yeah, there's a really interesting like European scene of it. Like I did a festival last year called Pick and Bones, and there's a band called like the Heathen Apostles, who are like dark folk. The Devil's Trade played it. There's a guy called Uncle Wormwood who was meant to be playing it this year, who I'm friends with, who's a Finnish artist who builds like cigar box guitars and just beats the shit out of them. And there's this really interesting dark root scene, and I'm the same as you, where the Liverpool scene is really insular and small, and it's heavily influenced by Bob Dylan and obviously the Beatles. So John Lennon's like God. And it's that type of sound. And I know if I'd have stuck to where Liverpool is and just played that, I'd have been fucked. I would have given up years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I like was lucky enough to just start traveling for gigs, because I know there's like a load of articles and kind of things when you're Googling like, should I tour or whatever. And there's always like, I've read things where you shouldn't tour outside of your home county or whatever if you aren't bringing in a crowd of 200 people to a show, which if anyone brings a crowd of 200 people, I'd be fucking shocked. I remember I saw 36 Crazy Fist in Liverpool and like 50 people came out to it.
Right, man, exactly.
So like I purposely went and tried to find different places in like the UK and Europe that welcome that type of stuff. Like there's a black metal bar in the Netherlands, which would fucking eat you up. And I've played there a couple of times. And it's, you have to go out of like your circles. And when you find these type of people, there is a really interesting European scene at the moment that would fucking love you.
That's fascinating to me, man, because it's crazy to think about, just how, I don't know how different in a way that is, because, there's really not a whole lot, locally, any remotely, inspired by the same sort of things I draw from. Not that I'm doing anything fancy or anything, but it blows my mind to imagine, going to a bar where that would be the fucking norm or something. That's crazy, man. I'd love to check out that scene. I wish I could get over to the UK, man. That'd be a brilliant time.
Yeah, man, I'll chuck you some emails on Messenger after this. But the black metal bar in Groningen in the Netherlands is called the White Wolf, and they have a shrine to Baphomet at the back of it that you play in front of.
Shit.
And it's so fucking cool. They're currently, obviously with COVID and everything, like venues and everything's fucked, but they're currently moving to a new venue. And I can't wait to get out there and play if Brexit doesn't fuck us. But there's, if you try and find a scene or you try and like scratch the surface, you definitely find something. And it's weird to know that if you don't look, you'll never see it. And it's obviously it's coming kind of full circle to what we talked about before, where it's like if you just pay attention to the mainstream, you're completely and utterly like in the dark. But if you just kind of scratch the surface and pay attention to what's on the periphery, you find amazing artists like yourself, and you start trying to just like dig into a sound that might represent you better than anything in the mainstream can.
Mike, I tell you what, you said it so well, man. This has been such a privilege and an honor to meet up with you guys and what you do at Rogue Country, man, and your music and what you do for other musicians. It's pretty incredible, man. It's really just really an honor to talk with you, brother, for real.
Thank you. I've been really hyped I've been listening to Dylan Is Dead. Like I'm not bullshitting. Like I'm not in any position where I need to pander to people or like have people on that I don't like, or like, so honestly, I've been fucking listening to your record a ton. It's so fun. And we're hitting up to the hour mark, so I'll let you go in a minute, but obviously you've got the record coming out. Do you have an idea of how long that album is? So you said like some tracks are 8 minutes. How like many tracks are going to be on this record?
Man, it's going to be, I think it's going to be either, I think it's going to be 3 or 4. And I want to get it a bit longer than Dylan Is Dead, because that was sort of, some of those, got that Misfits kind of time frame where it's like fucking 2 minutes and we're out or whatever. But I want to these longer tracks. I've had the opportunity to really get into creating some kind of soundscapes that are contrast a little bit more radically with the different parts, compared to Dylan Is Dead. Some really heavy tremolo picked, and then some really just fucking Devil's Triad sort of Black Sabbath. So I'm hoping it'll be 3-4 tracks, 30-minute range, and got some pretty kick-ass album artwork in the works from my friends in the band Stone Ram, and also their side project Forced of Orthanc, and they're doing some kick-ass some artwork, and I'm totally stoked on that, man. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it.
Cool, man. And what's like the instrumentation on the new record? Is it similar to Dylan Is Dead? Because I know that was like guitar, fiddle, drums, and vocals. Was there anything I'm missing on that, or was it?
No, you're spot on. It was, it was the idea with Dylan Is Dead was to do it exactly with some additions, in exactly in a way that it could be replicated with one person live. That was sort of the idea. And so that's sort of the dilemma I've run into a little bit with this follow-up, because I rehearsed with a drummer and a bass player, and really it was really exciting because I love playing, rock and metal together, and it sort of changed it in a way. And I'm not sure. I'm kind of on the fence right now, to be honest. I'm not sure if I were to add too many additional things without just forming a new band, if that would be sort of it wouldn't follow up nicely with that idea that it's something that you could replicate by. I like that that independence of when you can say I could do this shit by myself, and it's exactly how it would sound if I were playing it live.
Yeah, cool, man. And is that the kind of same motto that you're having for the next album? Because I know from my own stuff, and it's kind of a compliment, and it's kind of when people go, "I'd love to see you with a band," and it's like, I'd love to be able to pay for a fucking band.
I know, dude. I know. Isn't that the truth, man? You get that as a gigging musician playing out and stuff. You're like, man, the less people we have in this, the more money we're all making. Yeah. And the same's true with the I don't know, with this next album. I was thinking about that exact same thing today, because it just it's always good to add and to build in such a way that makes it bigger and better, but I don't want to leave behind that the minimalism in a sense of what makes that able to be played as one person, one individual. Yeah. So I think it should be something similar, but maybe if I can figure out a way to sort of authentically add more to it without making it something that's like a fucking album with 200 tracks on it or something like that. Yeah,
cool, man. I think that's the best thing to do, because obviously I'm a solo artist, and on the new record I've just brought, I've got like bass, pedal steel, fiddle, harmonica, but I don't think they're missing when I'm playing live and stuff. And I like to try and go, this is live and this is what the record is. And I know a lot of people think that once you've done the record, you should try and play as close to that as possible live. But then I think that can lead to not necessarily a stagnation, but you need to make it interesting. More importantly, I need to make it interesting for myself.
You're right. And you said it so perfectly, Mike, where it's that idea where like it's you have the album, which is like the masterpiece, the painting, and then the live show is going to be a copy of that, but in a different way. And like you said it perfectly, man, if you can find a way to make it so just playing it solo is not actually distracting, or it's not it's not lessening the impact of the performance. That's the and I'll be thinking about that for sure these next couple of months as we kind of get hopefully back into the studio, how to do that in the right way. It's crazy, man. This is my first experience really even recording anything. Dylan Is Dead was kind of like my first real paying for studio time kind of thing.
So how long did how long did you have recording for that? How long did it take to record Dylan Is Dead?
Oh, gosh, I think it was maybe just like maybe 2 or 3 days. It might have been just like all the guitar tracks, vocals, came in and did session, on the kick drum, and then violin and bowed guitar, because I wanted to try to be fucking Jimmy Page on that one track. But yeah, I think 3 days. It was pretty cut and dry, but I'm not sure what to expect with this one, man. It will be a little bit more of an undertaking for sure.
Yeah, sick, man. Well, I can't wait to hear. I'll let you go because we're past the hour and stuff. I want you to carry on with the rest of your afternoon and stuff. But thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me, man. This has been an absolute pleasure, and it's been amazing to virtually meet you, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you face to face at some point.
I hope so as well. Mike, thanks so much, brother. You're the man.
No, thanks so much, and I'll definitely have you back on once your new album's out and we can shoot this shit again.
All right, brother. I'll see you.
Cheers. Cool, and that is episode 20 of Into the Van, Into the Bag. I really hope you enjoyed this. Go check out Dylan Is Dead by Harry Pedigo. Come message me and get a free digital download of The Next Life. Just hit me up on any of my social medias or email me at mike333west@outlook.com. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast, and go check out Harry's music. He's phenomenal. I can't wait to see what he does in the future. Obviously, we're 20 episodes in, so go check out Bella White, go check out Ben Kaplan, Sean James, Crapsons, Plot Hounds. I'm so proud of this podcast. I can't thank you all enough for listening. So until next time, guys, stay safe. Peace.